A few days ago, I stumbled on a news article that implied that as early as next year, which is just a few months away, the Ghanaian Ministry of Education will be carrying out a nationwide implementation of the infamous Comprehensive Sexuality Education of the United Nations. Indeed, the Comprehensive Sexuality Education is actually the brainchild of the International Planned Parenthood Federation, commonly known as Planned Parenthood. And then Planned Parenthood works together with the Lucifer Trust, which is now known as Lucis Trust. And Lucis Trust actually was founded by Alice A. Bailey, a protege of Helena Blavatsky, a theosophist, an occultist, a woman who actually worships Lucifer and does not hide it. She is Luciferian. She founded, that's why she called it Lucifer Trust, but now it's called Lucis Trust because they wanted to hide the name. This Lucis Trust is at the center of almost everything that happens at the United Nations. They run the media at the United Nations. They run the meditation room at the United Nations. They are the people working hand in hand with Planned Parenthood to implement the Comprehensive Sexuality Education. It's actually comprehensive sexuality pollution of our children. That's exactly what it is, because they want to destroy our children. They want to destroy the innocence of the African kid. And there's a reason behind that. In the previous video that I put out about the Big Brother show being very satanic as it is, I talked about a particular man known as Benjamin Crumb. Benjamin Crumb, before he died, was the forerunner of Maitreya. Maitreya is the Antichrist. And this man said, which is Benjamin Crumb, that when the Antichrist emerges and announces his presence to the whole world, which will happen on a day he called the Day of Declaration, that he will not speak to anybody directly, he will speak to people inwardly, telepathically. Everybody all over the world will hear him inwardly as long as you are above the age of 14.
He will not speak, not say a word, but his thoughts, his ideas will be heard inwardly, telepathically, by everybody in the world, everybody above the age of 14.
So if you are above the age of 14, the Antichrist will come into a telepathic rapport with you and speak to you inwardly. But how many people have taken out the time to ask, why would the person be above the age of 14 before the Antichrist could have access to their soul and speak to their subconscious? You know why? Because the kids below the age of 14 are actually innocent. Because the Lord built a wall of protection around these children, and that protection is innocence. The devil has for ages been working so hard to break that wall down and destroy it. That's why he said you have to be above the age of 14 for the Antichrist to be able to speak directly to them. And so what have they been doing? Of course, they had used so many television programs, animations, and now they're about to put the icing on the cake of the pollution of our children. That's why they want to bring about the Comprehensive Sexuality Education, which actually is going to be teaching children as young as 4 and 5 years old that masturbation is a good thing, that it's okay to fall in love with someone of the same sex, that you can actually experiment with all kinds of objects when you are going to have sex, that you can do all kinds of stuff. Just perversion of sex for children.
The school district in Montana's capital is proposing new graphic sex education curriculum for students as young as 5 years old. Angry parents in Helena filled a school board meeting this week to demand the curriculum be pulled. The K-12 program not only includes graphic content, but also promotes the gay lifestyle. In first grade, children would be taught that human beings can love people of the same gender. By 5th grade, children would hear graphic content about numerous types of sexual acts. And in high school, they will be taught that erotic images in, quote, art help people understand sexuality.
Apparently $350 million for Planned Parenthood-style sex education programs in western states, including Montana, Idaho, Oregon, Alaska, for sex education programs starting now in kindergarten. I remember doing stories about this on the local level. I believe it was out in Wyoming, and some parents were fighting back, saying that they didn't want their local schools to be able to enforce this kind of education for kids so young. But now, could it be that the federal government is funding these kinds of programs?
They're able to find $350 million for this program that is comprehensive and graphic. And essentially what it does is it talks about how no sex is unsafe unless it causes pregnancy.
How can the Minister for Education in Ghana, the same Ghana that we are so proud of, that we have been praying for God to preserve for us, a minister, what were you thinking, dear minister? As far as I know and I'm concerned, there are certain level of education that is left for the parents of the child. You do not offer my child some type of sexuality education that is detrimental to his health, to his growth, to his moral upbringing. And you tell me that I should accept that. No, we're not going to accept that. Not in Ghana, not anywhere, not in Africa, not anywhere on the continent of Africa. Go and tell Planned Parenthood that Africans are united against teaching our children sexuality, teaching them about sex that will destroy them. It is satanic. It is extremely satanic. And sir, if you do not pull this program away, people like me will wage a campaign against you until that program is put. I am sending this message not just to Ghana, not just to the Ministry of Education in Ghana, but to every single government in Africa. These guys have a lot of money to spend to destroy us.
This is definitely an attack. It will affect your child rearing. It will affect your education system.
This is instructions for the teacher in the classroom to ask her or his students, how do people express their sexual feelings? What is abstinence? And here are some answers. Oral sex, masturbation, anal sex, massage, holding hands, touching each other's genitals, saying, I like you. And what they're doing is equating all these things. Saying I like you is equal to anal sex.
It is pornography. Men, especially on the house floor, did not want to look at. We couldn't show this on the television news, but yet we want our 4th grade children to be looking at this book.
In the name of sexuality education, children are seeing obscene materials that have been ruled by Congress and by the Supreme Court impossible to show to children.
An online CSE program for African youth called The World Starts With Me tells children that sexuality includes oral sex and masturbation. It then tells them it's their own choice if they want to lose their virginity. It shows children pictures of naked girls and boys in various stages of development, and then asks them to point out differences in their private parts. Parents likely will never know, as it is all done online away from home.
They have elementary students as young as 9 years old. Then they teach them how to wear a condom. And they have this plastic genitalia, and they even have young girls. They're teaching them how to put a condom on a male genitalia and boys how to put a condom on a women's genitalia without the knowledge and consent of the parents.
They're giving them handouts, negotiating sexual encounters with other students. For example, there are statements like this: can I take your shirt off? It makes me hot when you touch me here. Is it okay if I take my pants off?
Where we in Latin America, we still have a lot of poverty. We have communities that don't have fresh water, that don't have electricity. Focus is completely shifted from basic needs. They get comprehensive sexual education without the consent of parents, taking and deconstructing also the family.
My brother Luigi and I had an opportunity to go to the United Nations and give a speech on the UN floor. I told them how Planned Parenthood was passing out a booklet for HIV positive youth at the United Nations called Healthy, Happy and Hot. This is for the kids who have AIDS. It teaches about sexual pleasure through masturbation with same-sex partners and even if you are drunk.
This pamphlet called Healthy, Happy and Hot
tells young people you have the right not to disclose your HIV status to a sexual partner if you're not comfortable. It also tells young people that are HIV positive that if they decide with their partner not to wear a condom, that's their decision. The World Health Organization standards for sexuality education in Europe actually suggest that children ages 0 to 4 should be given information about masturbation and given the right to explore their gender identities. For ages 4 to 6, children should be taught about same-sex relationships and respect for different norms regarding sexuality.
The interests of organizations like UNFPA and IPPF is to get parents out of the picture and to radicalize and sexualize children.
UNFPA has tried to convince my country to change our positions on issues such as reproductive rights and comprehensive sexuality education. Madam Chair, does the UNFPA think it can do this because Nauru is the smallest member state of the United Nations?
The Nigerian government was actually told by the Western countries that if they do not give in, that they will be denied foreign aid.
On page 89 of a UNICEF-published Sexual and Reproductive Health Manual, UNICEF listed situations in which one can obtain sexual pleasure that included sexual responses directed towards inanimate objects, animals, minors, and non-consenting persons.
In the context of the Sustainable Development Goals that determines the agenda for the next 15 years, the voice is very, very biased. It's just International Planned Parenthood Federation and their affiliates have a direct influence on the outcome documents, on what is established, what is negotiated at the UN.
Some of the objectives of the UNESCO Sexuality Education Guidelines include teaching children at age 9 about sexual stimulation and the definition and function of orgasm, and at age 15, that both men and women can receive sexual pleasure with a partner of the same or opposite sex. The It's All One curriculum, also promoted by International Planned Parenthood, reveals the multiple manipulative tactics used to indoctrinate and sexualize children through CSE. Like other CSE programs, It's All One claims, among other things, to be evidence-based, comprehensive, human rights, gender-sensitive, and culturally appropriate education that will increase young people's responsible decision-making, to reduce adolescent rates of pregnancy and sexually transmitted infections, including HIV. It's All One, however, like most CSE programs, is really just cleverly disguised abortion rights, sexual pleasure education, masquerading as human rights, gender, and sexual and reproductive health education. It aggressively promotes abortion. With over 112 references to abortion, It's All One has an obsessive focus on sexual pleasure, mentioning sexual pleasure 62 times. It promotes multiple sex acts and instructs children on how to stimulate themselves or their partner to orgasm. To explore their readiness, children fill out a worksheet that infers children are ready to have sex when you are feeling sexually attracted to the other person, and when you're feeling comfortable about telling the other person what feels good sexually. It teaches that human rights encompass sexual rights, including alleged rights to all persons to sexual expression and the right to seek sexual pleasure. Hooking children on sex is a multi-billion-dollar business for Planned Parenthood and other similar organizations. This is because children, or prospects, once sexualized, become Planned Parenthood customers, dependent upon their services. Comprehensive sexuality education programs are disguised under many names. They may be called comprehensive sex or sexual education, education on human sexuality, reproductive health education, information on sexual and reproductive health, family life education, teen pregnancy prevention, rape prevention, anti-bullying programs, HIV/AIDS prevention, and sometimes even abstinence or abstinence plus education. CSE programs usually falsely claim to be age-appropriate, evidence-based, healthy sexuality education that will prevent teen pregnancy, sexual abuse, STDs, and HIV.
One of the handouts that concerns me the most is called the genderbread person. They teach that gender is a spectrum, that you can choose to be whatever you want. You could be all female one day and the next day feel like you're neither female or male.
Frankly, it's confusing. It's mental molestation. We're confusing these kids as to what they are. From a medical perspective, when sexual freedom is the priority, then sexual health is going to suffer.
Sexual rights, sexual education movements began with Dr. Alfred C. Kinsey. Kinsey actually had pedophiles measure with a stopwatch how many children could achieve what he called orgasms within a 24-hour period. Today, comprehensive sexuality education is based on this philosophy that children are sexual from birth, created by Kinsey.
His Excellency, Nana Akufo-Addo. Sir, you already know my stand with you. I have always been a fan of yours since the day you took office as the president of that beautiful country, Ghana. In fact, just a few days ago, I listened to you speak at the 74th session of the UN General Assembly, and I was like, my goodness, I couldn't be prouder.
The flight of capital is continuing the foreign exploitation of Africa, represented by colonialism and imperialism. The report of the panel, chaired by the highly respected former South African President, Thabo Mbeki, on the illicit flow of funds from Africa, has raised the lid on what many had always suspected, but did not have the figures to support. According to that report, Africa is losing annually more than 50 billion United States dollars through illicit financial outflows. Collaboration is certainly needed amongst nations of the world to stop this rape of Africa.
But can I tell you something, Your Excellency? The biggest rape that can ever happen on the continent of Africa is when our younger generation, as young as 4 and 5, are being destroyed. Let me say this in closing. Mr. President, I plead with you, sir. It is time for you to intervene. I don't know if you were briefed on this, whether you were told or not. I am speaking from my heart, Mr. President. This thing, allowing this to sail through, will be tantamount to you shooting yourself in the foot. Take this to the bank and cash it. And so I am pleading with you. Whatever power you have to stop this, deploy it right now and stop this wickedness. Ghanaian children will not be given a sexuality education that will destroy them and destroy the entire future generation of Africa. It means we no longer have a viable future generation that will be African. We will have a generation that will be so un-African we will not be able to recognize them. And this is what this is all aimed at being. And I don't think this is what you represent, Mr. President. Can you please do whatever it takes to stop this wickedness? Because we cannot take it. Not in your country, not in Ghana, not in Ethiopia, not anywhere on the continent of Africa. We will fight against this and we will make sure that we win. They will not win us.
Say no to CSE! Say no to CSE!
We've got to stop it. We've got to use everything at our disposal. We have to stand together to stop this attack against our children.
And they have all this funding and this organization, but we know that if we stand together, we can do something for the family, for the children.
We stopped the Kinsey Sexuality Education program in Croatia.
It is time for parents to say, no, my family is mine. My wife is mine. I am hers. Our children are ours.
Band together and find ways to stop it from entering your country.
Men have to rise up, defend their family. On matters sexual, the fathers have got to stand up. Say, you have no place talking sexuality to my children. We resist it, even with our lives, because that's what life is all about.
It's happening on our watch. If we don't do something about it, it is all of us that carry that guilt.